The professor had written the wrong formula on the board, and the alien in the third row had been staring at it for 6 minutes without saying anything. Zara Osei noticed because she was the teaching assistant, and it was her job to notice things. She noticed the erroneous coefficient in the orbital mechanics equation. She noticed that 12 of the 22 students in the seminar room had not opened their notebooks. She also noticed that the alien student, who had registered late under the name Erean, listed his home institution as a Confederation educational exchange, and sat always in the same chair with the same improbable composure, had spotted the error at almost exactly the same moment she had, and had then done precisely nothing about it. Most students who caught a professor's error announced it immediately. It was a kind of academic sport. Erean wrote the correct formula in the margin of his notebook, drew a neat box around it, and waited. Professor Hartwell finished his derivation, turned to the class, and asked if anyone had questions. Zara raised her hand. "The coefficient in the third line should be negative," she said. "The vector direction." Hartwell looked at the board. He made the correction without fanfare and moved on. In the third row, Erean made a small mark beside the boxed formula in his notebook. He did not look up. Zara made a note of her own, not in a notebook, in the part of her attention she kept for things that didn't yet fit. The Orath Confederation had sent Prince Erean Arath on a cultural immersion assignment because his father's ministers had run out of other ideas. He was 26 by human reckoning, third in the succession, and universally described in court dispatches as brilliant and entirely unsuitable for rule. The dispatches were not wrong. He had declined his ceremonial combat trial twice. He had written a dissertation on cross-species stellar cartography that his tutors had called exceptional, and his father's general had called irrelevant. He had spent 3 years corresponding with human academic institutions about orbital gravitational modeling, and when his first minister suggested the exchange as a means of broadening his diplomatic sensibility, Erean had agreed so quickly that everyone was briefly suspicious. He was not supposed to reveal his rank. That was the only rule his father had insisted on. Immersion, the king had said, meant ordinary. No diplomatic titles, no guards within 100 meters, no translation matrix beyond the standard commercial unit all Orath citizens carried. Go and learn what humans are when they do not know they are being observed. Erean had arrived with a single bag, rented a room above a hardware shop 3 streets from campus, and enrolled in 2 graduate seminars. The orbital mechanics course was the easier of the 2. The harder one was the Friday afternoon research colloquium run by Dr. Zara Osei, which was not officially a seminar she taught, but which she ran with a quiet, practical authority that the nominal instructor, a visiting researcher named Paulson, appeared to find both useful and slightly humbling. The colloquium covered deep space gravitational anomalies, a field in which the Orath Confederation had done significant work that had not yet been published in any human journal. Erean attended it because he was genuinely interested, and because he was developing the strong impression that Zara Osei had independently arrived at conclusions his people's top researchers had spent 4 years formalizing. He had not said this out loud. He was following his father's instruction. Ordinary, he reminded himself. He was finding ordinary significantly more complicated than anticipated. The anomaly in the second data set appeared on a Wednesday, and Zara spent 40 minutes trying to isolate it before Erean, seated across the table in the shared research lab they had both apparently decided to occupy at the same hour, said without looking up from his own screen, "If it is the one I am seeing, it is not an instrument error." She looked at him. "You can see my screen from there." "I cannot. I am working from the same public dataset. We appear to have found the same signal." She turned her chair to face him. He turned his to face her. For a moment they looked at each other across the work tables, and the stacked journals, and the half-eaten lunch she had forgotten about 2 hours ago. "What are you seeing?" she asked. "A resonance pattern in the outer drift zone that matches a Orath theoretical model for subgravitational lattice propagation. The model is not published in human literature." He paused, as if measuring how much was appropriate to say. "I am somewhat familiar with it." "Orath theoretical model," she said. "You're from the Confederation." "Yes. This kind of thing is normally in sealed research archives there." "Yes," he said again. She pulled her chair closer and turned her screen toward him. He pulled his toward her. They spent the next 3 hours dismantling the anomaly from both ends simultaneously, arguing about 3 different possible explanations, discarding 2 of them, and arriving at a 4th that neither of them had proposed at the outset. It was the kind of working session Zara had had perhaps 4 times in her graduate career, the kind where she forgot she was supposed to be having it with someone she didn't fully know yet, because the work itself made the knowing happen faster than the social architecture usually allowed. At 9:30, she looked up from the final calculation and found him watching her write with an expression she couldn't immediately name. Not unfamiliar exactly, more like careful. "You've done this before," she said. "This specific problem." "A version of it," he said. "The Confederation's version. We arrived somewhere similar 2 years ago and could not explain the remaining variants. You just did." "We did," she said. He looked at the shared calculation on the screen between them. "Yes," he said quietly, "we did." The arrangement became, without either of them explicitly deciding it, a regular thing. Tuesdays and Thursdays in the lab. Sometimes a walk to the campus observatory when the weather was cooperative. Once, an argument about navigational mathematics that started in the stairwell and finished. An hour later, at a food cart outside the physics building where Zara bought 2 containers of noodles because it was 10 at night and neither of them had eaten. Erean was careful. That was what she noticed most. He was careful with her ideas in the way some people are careful with things they consider genuinely valuable. He did not interrupt. He did not assume. When she was wrong, and occasionally she was, he said so directly and without performance, and then he waited while she worked through to where the mistake was, rather than simply showing her. It was the habit, she thought, of someone who had been trained to teach rather than to demonstrate superiority. She was also, gradually, aware that he was not telling her something. It was not deception exactly. It was more like a door he kept closed, quietly and consistently, without making a point of it. She did not push. She knew what it was to have something you kept to one side, while you figured out what you were going to do with it. On a Thursday in the 6th week, he arrived at the lab with a formal notification on his translation unit screen that he made no attempt to hide from her, and his face had the look of someone who had just heard news they had been expecting and had not finished deciding how to feel about it. "Your research proposal," she said. It was not a question. He had mentioned it in passing, something his home institution required before the end of the term. "No," he said. He set the translation unit on the table. "My father has moved the succession date forward. I am required home before the end of the month." She looked at him for a long moment. "Succession date?" "Yes." "Erean," she kept her voice steady. "What succession?" He looked at the table between them, at the printed calculation sheets and the 2 cold cups of tea, and the notebook with the margin-boxed formula from the first week that he had, she now realized, never thrown away. Then he looked at her. "My father is the Arathvel of the Orath Confederation," he said, "which makes me the 3rd heir to the throne currently and the first capable of the successor's mandate, which my 2 older siblings have both formally declined. There is a ceremony. I have been avoiding it." He paused. "I was told not to tell you or anyone here because the point of the exchange was to observe humans as they actually are. I was following the instruction." Zara was quiet for a moment. Not shocked, exactly. The pieces arranged themselves into a shape that had always been possible, now that she was looking at it. The improbable composure, the Confederation Research Archives, the careful quality of his attention. "The formula in the notebook," she said. "I noticed it at the same time you did. You didn't say anything. I wanted to see what you would do. And you raised your hand," he said. "In a room full of people who were also silent, you raised your hand and said the coefficient was wrong." He looked at her. "I have been in rooms full of people who know the correct answer and say nothing because saying it costs something. You said it because it was true and someone needed to. That is not a small thing." She looked at the notification on the translation unit. "When do you leave?" "The ceremony is in 18 days. "And after the ceremony?" He was quiet for a moment. "I become the successor. I take the mandate. I return to the Confederation." He paused. "It is what I was born to do. I have never been under any significant illusion about that." "Then why come here?" "Because my father said go and learn what humans are when they do not know they are being observed." He met her eyes. "I learned more than he probably intended." The next 18 days were the same and not the same. They worked. The colloquium's end-of-term dataset produced a result that neither of them had predicted at the outset. A clean confirmation of the subgravitational lattice model that had 2 years of Confederation research embedded in it, and 6 weeks of Zara's independent analysis layered over it. Paulson, who had the nominal credit on the colloquium, looked at the combined result with the expression of a man who understands he has been overtaken by events and is choosing to be gracious about it. Erean drafted a co-authored research note. He showed it to her the evening before his departure. "You listed me first," she said. "The variance resolution was yours," he said. "The Confederation's existing model was already documented. Your contribution was the new part." She looked at the document for a long moment. At the top, the authorship line read, "Zara Osei, Erath." Below it, the Orath Confederation seal sat beside the university department heading, the kind of pairing that would, when this was submitted, cause a certain amount of institutional excitement she was going to have to manage without him. "Your name has the seal," she said. "That's going to tell everyone who you are." "Yes," he said, "I know." She looked at him. "You're doing this on purpose." "I am giving you the correct attribution," he said, "and I am not hiding from it." A pause. "I am also, if you are interested, registering you formally with the Confederation Academic Exchange Office as a full research counterpart. That means you can apply for access to the sealed lattice archives, co-publish on the remaining variance data, and if you chose to, continue the work from a Confederation academic post." He said it carefully, watching her. "The post would be in the capital. The capital is where I will be." The lab was quiet. Through the window, the observatory dome was lit against the night sky, the telescope inside it pointing at the same drift zone they had spent 6 weeks dissecting. "That's a very long way to go," she said, "for someone who isn't sure what they're asking." "I am sure," he said. "I am uncertain whether it is fair to ask." She looked at the research document, then at him. Then at the cold tea, the formula notebook, the stacked printouts that represented 6 weeks of the best working hours she had had in 3 years of graduate study. "The data follow-up alone would take 2 years," she said, "minimum." "Yes," he said. "And you'd be doing the succession thing at the same time, managing a throne." "Presumably." "So it would be complicated." "Yes." She picked up the research document and looked at the authorship line again. "Zara Osei, Erath." The correct order, the correct credit, the correct name laid out without apology or concealment. "I have spent 6 years," she said, "on anomalies that nobody else in my department thought were worth the time." She set the document down. "You sat across a lab table from me and told me, without any ceremony, that I had independently confirmed 2 years of your civilization's top research. A pause. I'm not actually sure complicated is the thing that should stop me. He looked at her steadily. He had been careful all term. He was careful now too, but underneath it, visible to anyone paying the right kind of attention, was something that had been building quietly for 6 weeks and had no pretense left in it. I raised my hand, she said, because it was true and someone needed to. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The recognition between them was as clean and certain as a calculation arriving at the correct result, not loud, not performed, not borrowed from someone else's vocabulary. Simply true and present and sufficient. She would give her notice the following morning. He would file the research note with both seals intact. The Confederation's Academic Exchange Office would process the paperwork in 11 days, and an appointment letter would arrive that her department head would read 4 times before calling her into his office with the expression of a man who has simultaneously lost a promising researcher and gained a significant institutional collaboration, and is still working out how to feel about both. But that was tomorrow. That evening, the formula notebook sat open on the table between them, the margin box still neat around the correct coefficient, and outside the window the drift zone that had started everything turned its slow, indifferent arc across the sky. Patient and vast and not, it turned out, half as indifferent as it looked. Zara looked at the anomaly in the second dataset one more time, then she closed the file. Some things, once you had confirmed them, did not need to be measured again. You just needed to know what you were going to do next.